Hey guys, it's Debbie, and wow, we made it through another year. Highs, lows, good films, the films that should never have seen the light of day. On my channel, you will also find my recap videos about my top 10 best and worst films of 2023. And you know what? I took a trip down memory lane and I checked what were the first and last films I watched this year. It all started with a Japanese anime short film called Raintown. Instead, the first feature-length movie I watched was Smiley Face, and wrapped up 12 months later on December 28th with the French film Under the Stars of Paris, which I will talk about later in this video. But now let's kick off with everything I watched this month, and of course I would love to hear what you've been watching, so let me know with a comment down below. I think I need to start with Saltburn, the film which set the internet on fire. It stars one of my favourite actors, Barry Keoghan, as a young man who becomes obsessed with Jacob Elordi's much more popular, rich, successful character who he meets at uni. They end up spending their summer break in a fancy mansion, and that's where things get crazy. If you're planning on watching this film, here's a heads up. Don't look it up because there are spoilers everywhere. Also, people are calling it one of the most unsettling films they've ever seen. They describe it as the most vulgar, erotic, disturbing thing they've ever laid their eyes on. In my opinion, your reaction will depend on what you're used to watch. This film is a hit among the younger crowd who have understandably probably never seen many really disturbing or weird movies. There are some scenes and twists which are a little less conventional, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that unsettling. And I also felt that apart from those scenes, it was a little self-indulgent. But I leave it up to you. Some say its predictability is actually a critique of the shallow upper-class scene. One thing is for certain though, Barry Keoghan nailed it as always. I actually watched another Jacob Elordi film this month, the much-awaited Priscilla, all about the life of Elvis Presley's wife. Elordi takes on the role of the king himself, and honestly I didn't think he did too much of a terrible job, but the film pretty much orbits around Priscilla, played by Kaylee Spaney. She absolutely nails the portrayal of this woman in a huge mansion, cameras always rolling, trapped in fame's suffocating embrace, and while her husband showers her with anything money can buy, he also dictates what she should look like, what she should change about her appearance, how she should behave. This of course when he's actually at home. It's an interesting story that delves into all that glamorous but very lonely world, and it was really interesting to hear the real Priscilla Presley's take on the film. It's quite sad but also very interesting. Then one of the movies I enjoyed most this month is Ash is the Purest White, a Chinese film I had my eye on for ages, and finally we're here. And I was not disappointed. I absolutely love this film. This movie captures the whirlwind of change in the Chinese economy during the early 2000s, centering on a woman from a small coal mining town. She finds herself in a lot of trouble due to her association with her gangster boyfriend, and this film has great visuals, great soundtrack, great acting, and now I'm eagerly looking forward to watching Still Life by the same director, and I've got high hopes after this cinematic masterpiece. Another great film I watched this month is The Holdovers, a story I loved so much I dedicated a whole other video on my channel to discussing why mastering comedic roles is so hard and how this film hits all the right spots. I'll leave that linked if you're interested. This film is set in the 70s and follows a school teacher tasked with looking after the kids stranded at school during the Christmas holidays. Alongside the school cook and a few others, they have to survive the weeks together while getting to know each other better. I raved about this film so much on my channel in the last week, so I won't bore you again, but if you haven't seen this film, definitely go watch it. I absolutely loved it. A film that instead I felt didn't quite hit the mark was Naiad. Now, to be specific, the acting was good, but the storytelling could have been a bit more engaging. It didn't quite hit it. Annette Bening portrays the real-life marathon swimmer Diane Naiad attempting her epic Cuba to Florida swim, while Jodie Foster portrays her lifelong best friend and trainer, and their chemistry and enduring friendship amidst all the trials are beautifully portrayed. However, the film itself is a bit of a broken record, constantly cycling and showing again and again and again the various attempts to swim this stretch of sea. Sure, there are occasional dramatic moments with sharks or the health setbacks, but it feels like more of the same repetitive story. But I don't know, maybe my attention span is getting shorter every day and I'm just easily bored. Then compared to other months, I didn't watch many horror films. I watched The Exorcist Believer, which was supposed to kick off a fresh new chapter in the Exorcist series, even bringing back some of the OG actors, but unfortunately it fell short of the legacy. This was just another run-of-the-mill exorcism movie with the usual god, demons, and chatter. Maybe the occasional creative insult by the possessed girls. Sometimes these reboots just can't recapture the magic of the originals, and this one seems to have missed the mark, especially in a market which is oversaturated of all exorcism movies, always trying to make their scenes as scary as possible. I then watched Home Education, a film which surprised most people. I think everybody was geared up for this to be an absolute flop, but it does take on a twisted turn. It's a story of this girl who lives alone with her mother in an isolated house in a wood. She's homeschooled but also kept from having contact with the outside world, all thanks to her mother's rather peculiar beliefs. But things take a dark turn when a stranger turns up at the house and we find out more about what's going on behind those walls. Sure, it might not be a masterclass in acting or dialogue, but let me tell you, the atmosphere, the music, those spine-tingly sound effects and the jump scares, that got under everybody's skin. Sometimes a horror film's ability to make you squirm in your seat outweighs its flaws. I then watched the 1970s film Count Dracula starring Christopher Lee, which naive me thought was its only Dracula film, and then I discovered he made like 10 more, and I think some of them are better than this one. In this film, Jonathan Harker arrived at Dracula's castle, only to then of course land in trouble there. It's the classic story, it's the usual Dracula tale, but I'm curious now, what is the best Christopher Lee Dracula movie to watch? Let me know. I think that's about it for horror, unless we include Leave the World Behind, but that's more of a thriller. This film sparked quite the debate. Some found it a bit disappointing, myself included, but others felt that it is a very realistic depiction of where our society is headed. The story revolves around a family renting a remote house for a getaway, only for things to spiral out of control when the supposed owners of the house show up, claiming they need to stay there for shelter due to power outages. This is then followed by all sorts of weird events. People start to panic, they don't know what to do, who and what to believe. Now, this film's got some serious plot holes, questionable CGI, and some very annoying characters, but by the end it did get me thinking about how fragile our society can become, ready to collapse on itself just on the basis of panic, overthinking, judging, presumptions. But another Netflix movie I watched is Spy Kids Armageddon, which was quite a misfire. Did we really need this 5th chapter? At this point it feels like a stretch, and I really hope they're not trying to reboot the whole saga here. This film just fell flat for me. It felt lackluster, like it was targeting only the iPad generation of kids, losing the general family-friendly appeal of the earlier movies. Plus it looked older than the first movie and lacked the vibrancy of the original chapters. It just didn't hit the mark. Instead, a sequel that was a pleasant surprise was the new Chicken Run movie, Dawn of the Nugget, which I was really looking forward to. I've been a fan of the original Chicken Run movie for over 2 decades, so my expectations were cautiously high. I really hoped they wouldn't ruin this, and guess what? They pulled it off quite nicely. There might have been a little fan service with Mrs. Tweedy, but it felt like a seamless continuation rather than a forced comeback from 20 years ago. The humour, the touch of horror, which is surprisingly always intense in these films, it all felt familiar yet fresh. The improved graphics were a plus, but what really stood out was that the vibe remained true to the original. If I had to nitpick, the first film, of course, introduced us to this whole big world of anthropomorphic chickens trying to outsmart humans, while this sequel focuses just mostly on one heist. But all in all, it was a good film, and it was quite a good trip down memory lane. Then Suzume turned out to be the only other animated film I watched this month, and I am now kicking myself for not watching it in cinemas when it came out a few months ago. I can definitely understand why this film is getting so much praise. Directed by Makoto Shinkai, the genius behind beloved anime like Your Name, this film revolves around a schoolgirl who, after a random encounter with a stranger on her way to school, ends up having to save the whole country from a series of disasters caused by a supernatural entity. Who knew I'd get so much enjoyment out of watching a schoolgirl and an anthropomorphic stool run after a cat for 2 hours? I'll leave it at that. Then this month I finished watching The Crown as the final episodes were released, and it covers recent events post Princess Diana's passing, with Prince William and Harry growing up, with William heading off to university and meeting Kate. Over the years, this series has always been a good watch, offering an engaging glimpse into the life of Queen Elizabeth and her circle. Although it takes quite a few creative liberties, particularly in the final seasons, it's been an overall engaging portrayal. I then indulged in a few romantic movies this month, starting off with the timeless classic The Holiday, a film which has become a bit of a traditional rewatch every year, and even after so many rewatches, its charm, its humour always work. Kate Winslet and Cameron Diaz portray two women from wildly different backgrounds who exchange houses for the Christmas holidays and get to experience each other's lives, potentially finding love on the opposite side of the world. And then I watched Beautiful Disaster, which is more of just a disaster. There's nothing beautiful in this. It's easily one of the worst rom-coms I've watched in quite a while. This film serves up an unrealistic, shallow, poorly written love story between two college students, and you can tell a story is bad when they desperately pack in as much sex and muscles and cheesy jokes as possible, hoping you'll forget the actual plot. But while I complain about this film, I again this month rewatched Twilight, but at this point we don't talk about that anymore. But while we're on to relationships, I wanted to mention May December, a film in which the relationship will want to make you peel your skin off. And to add to the shock factor, it's a true story. Natalie Portman takes on the role of an actress preparing to portray a woman known for her scandalous romantic and sexual history, which I guess is still ongoing. I don't want to spoil it too much, but I definitely didn't expect to like this film so much, or hate it, and that deep sense of rage and revulsion indicates that the story really hit the mark. Next up, I watched Le Otto Montagne, The Eight Mountains, a film which was a huge hit here in Italy a few months ago, but which I never got round to watching. Basically, me, my friends and family were all influenced by this one Letterboxd review as soon as the film came out, which said Le Otto Montagne, due coglioni, which translated and censored means it's boring. I get where that comment is coming from. This film's like a blend of the expansive landscape shots from Into the Wild meshed with a bromance on the lines of Brokeback Mountain, although without the romance. It's the lifelong tale of two friends who keep crossing paths at various stages of their lives, all tied together by the mountain environment. Opinions are split. Some say it's absolutely beautiful, it won a ton of awards, others say it's dragged out way too long. I agree, some scenes could have been cut down, so I'll leave it up to you to form your opinion. I then watched The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, a title I always seem to get wrong, but this is such a fun movie. Nicolas Cage basically portrays himself, but a version stuck in a career rut, haunted by the literal ghost of his past successes, and things take a wild turn when he visits the private island of a super rich fan of his. And I'm going to leave you with this one piece of information. One of the best scenes of this film involves Paddington. That's all I'll say. Then in December, Zack Snyder finally released his wannabe epic game-changing sci-fi action movie Rebel Moon. Now, I'm usually a fan of Zack Snyder's works, but this went on a completely different path from expected. It left us all scratching our heads, feeling unimpressed, trying to piece together names, locations, side quests, while the characters just kept on moving through scenes in Snyder's signature slow motion style. But now we have reached the final film of the list and the final film of the whole year. The French film Under the Stars of Paris, which I guess wasn't the most epic film to end the year, but it is what it is. The story follows a homeless woman in Paris who takes a young migrant boy under her wing while he's searching for his mother, all while trying to navigate a society in which nobody wants to be approached by a homeless person, not even when just asking for some information. It's pretty sad at points, but also quite packed with stereotypes. But here we are at the end of the year. I think my first film of 2024 will be The Boy and the Heron, because it releases in Italy on January 1st. Actually, probably by the time you've seen this video, I will have already seen the film. I will let you know what I think of it. But now I'd like to know what you've been watching, what you enjoyed, what you hated. Let me know everything with a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.